Hello, I'm Representative John Payne. It's my pleasure today to be here with Major Dick Winters. Major Winters is not only a constituent of mine in the 106th District, but he's a longtime friend. In fact, I knew Major Winters when I just knew him as Dick Winters. Dick, thank
Yes,
you for
sir.
being here today.
Good morning. Glad to have you.
Tell us a little bit
Welcome.
about your room here.
Well, this is what I refer to as my den, and this is where I retreat to share my memories with those that write and are interested in the history of World War II. And what I have here in my den, I'm surrounded by my maps, my memorabilia, and in the back along the wall you'll see the 506 colors, which I'm very proud of. The boys had that flag made up specially for me to fit my wall. And below that, I have a map of Bastogne that I'm very proud of. And that is the actual map, Jonah, that I carried with me at Bastogne. To the best of knowledge of history, we had, when 101st moved into Bastogne headquarters, we were ahead of the troops. I say we, they were ahead of the troops. And had no maps of the area, had no maps of what we were going to be getting into, so the fellas took off and they went through town, and they were able to find, I understand, 27 of these maps. And that was it for the division. I was lucky enough to get one, and I've taken good care of it, and that's why it's there. As you can see, if you look at it carefully, there's a brown section in the center, and that brown section tells the story that the map was only folded once. Since we never moved and we never had to unfold it to use the map for going further than Bastogne. So the map was folded once, it was folded and put in my pocket, and that's where it stayed until you're looking at it here today. That's the reason I take great pride in it. And to the left of the map, you'll see another map that depicts the situation at Bastogne, where we had the perimeter around Bastogne to defend. That's 17 miles for the division. And on the outside of that, in red, you'll pick up outlines of German tanks. And that indicates and tells you the number of German units and who they were that had us surrounded. So this is a situation at Bastogne. The next map we have over here to the right would be a map of Holland and the situation at Market Garden. And Market Garden, of course, we can talk about that later, but Market Garden was an interesting campaign. And there's a few things went right, but most things went wrong. The wall here to the back of you, John, would show the decorations I've received, and underneath that would be a map of my escape map. This was given to me before D-Day. It was there was a few of them for each company, and I ended up with one of them. This is the map, a silk map. I sewed in the hem of my trousers, and the idea was that if you were captured, that you would have a map to try and escape with. Fortunately, I never had to use it, so it stayed sewed in the hem of my trousers. That's the interesting part of that map. To my back, you'll see some pictures of Ambrose and at the premiere on Utah Beach for the show. And underneath that, you'll have a picture of Damian Lewis and myself. Damian, of course, is British, and he played my story. On the top of the top row and on the back wall here, I reserved that for the generals. And we have Colin Powell. And we have the other commanding officers of generals that were friends that I've met over the years. The one to your right on the top row there is another General Powell. And he is a good friend I met through the 28th Division here at Fort Indian Town Gap. Wonderful man. That's about what you're surrounded with. I should point out, though, that over here, on the other side of the room, we have the filing cabinets. And I take great pride in those filing cabinets because they contain letters and records of this whole thing. There's letters in there from every man that was in the company. The letters that they wrote to me before we got into making the Band of Brothers. And then when Hank sold the rights to this story, A Band of Brothers, the first thing I did was send him copies of all the memories I had given Ambrose to write it. And his letter of reply, which is in the footlocker here at the end of the room, is you send me golden nuggets. And he was well pleased with them because I had shared with him my memories from day one. And the result was in a few weeks' time he had a script writer come in here, and so we spent 2.5 months sitting in this chair that you're sitting in, and I'm sitting here where I'm at today, and we put together what they call the Bible, the outline for the miniseries Band of Brothers, and this is where the outline was written right here.
How long did that take, Dick?
Took 2.5 months to make the outline. And I have a copy of it over here on top of the file, and to continue all these letters that went into writing A Band of Brothers. And the records here for making the miniseries for the miniseries Band of Brothers will end up at the proper time in my life go to Carlisle War College, where it belongs, I feel, for future references, for future historians. And I think we're very fortunate to have Carlisle in our neighborhood, and I want to take advantage of it, want to support it.
Well, I want to tell you, we're very fortunate to have you here to support Carlisle, because without your memoirs and without your knowledge, we wouldn't have that kind of information at Carlisle.
Did you know that on May 25th, 1905, the statue of Commonwealth was installed on top the Capitol Dome in Harrisburg? Simply called Commonwealth, the bronze cast statue weighs in at 4 tons and stands over 14 feet high. In 1904, Roland Hinton Perry was chosen to sculpt this artistic figure, which he referred to as the symbolic embodiment of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Capitol architect Joseph Houston designed this bronze masterpiece with her right arm extending to symbolize kindness, and with her left arm holding a ribbon mace symbolizing justice. During her decades of overlooking the city of Harrisburg, Commonwealth has endured periods of harsh weather leading to her deterioration and need for restoration. Prior to her refurbishing in 1997, Commonwealth was last restored in the 1940s. Under the direction of Rathgeber Goss Associates, the Commonwealth statue has undergone restoration and regilding to the form originally envisioned by her sculptor. Since being replaced on top the Capitol Dome in 1998, Commonwealth now graces the state capitol building. Now you know.
Dick, you mentioned about your experiences with Band of Brothers, and I know that spin-off out of that was Saving Private Ryan.
Correct.
And that you have, of course, met Ambrose and Hanks and Spielberg and a whole crew. Before we get into the actual questions that I have on the 506th and your personal experiences, just give us a brief, what was it like? I mean, having been a local resident all my life, I can't imagine what that was like to meet these Hollywood stars.
To meet these folks, it comes at this stage of life, it comes as a surprise, a pleasant surprise. And of course, I give all the credit to Ambrose. And if you look through these files that we talked about here, I kept each and every letter. And the nice thing about it, I didn't mention a minute ago, the fact that in putting together this book, he was keeping every letter that I wrote him, every letter that all the men wrote him. And when he was done with this, his next project was D-Day. So his way of working was to clean out his office completely from end to end. And what did he do? He put it in boxes and sent it to me. So I sat right here in this office for one whole winter, going through this mass of papers and separating this so that each man has a file, and I have all his letters, and I have all the correspondence with Simon and Schuster to put the book together, and it's all right there for, as I mentioned, Carlisle, the whole thing from beginning to end. So, and of course, then to get back to your question, the end result was in selling this to Hanks. And there's an interesting comment that I can share with you on that. The night that he sold it to Hanks, Ambrose gave me a call. He's all excited. And he said he has some wonderful news. And he says, Dick, I sold the rights to the Band of Brothers to Tom Hanks under one condition, that he does not play your part because he's too old. So that was his big joke for that moment, and we shared that and went on from there. And of course, part of the story on Band of Brothers is when we were on the line and we had the Nylon boys contact us. They were friends. They were in the 82nd Airborne, and so we got that's part of that memory, that story, combined with Band of Brothers. And the spin-off of that, of course, ended up with Saving Private Ryan, and in the premiere for it, which I was invited to go to, and took my good friend Bob Hoffman with me, and from Lebanon. And during that, there was a premiere before the premiere at one of the studios, and we were invited to go to this premiere, and also the Nylon family was there at the same time. So at that time we had the opportunity to meet the family. It was very nice. And then of course the next night was the premiere.
Mm-hmm. I've heard people comment that Hanks and Spielberg were true gentlemen, that they're pleasant to do business with. And
right.
I think that goes a long way to distill some of the problems we have with some people in Hollywood, that these two guys were true gentlemen.
They're true gentlemen. And at the premiere, of course, had the opportunity to visit with Hanks and Spielberg, and it was very nice.
Good. Dick, there's several questions that I know I want to ask. I'm sure the audience would love to ask even more, but let's see if we can cover a variety of questions. One I know that's been on our minds has been, in the book it talks about you going to training. Did you go directly from civilian life to the paratrooper training, or did you go to basic training first, and then at basics did they ask for volunteers?
Well, just going back one step further and graduating from Franklin Marshall. At that time we had the draft, and you were obligated to 1 year of service. So rather than sit around, my reasoning was rather than to sit around and get a job, we'll say, and then after have the job, have my number pulled with the lottery and be taken into the service, why not get the 1 year's obligation out of the way, then get a job? So with that in mind, I volunteered for the service, and so shortly I was in the service as a private, going through New Cumberland and sent to Camp Croft, South Carolina. And incidentally, Jim, at that time, the pay was $21 a month. And we like to put it $21 a month. We made $21 a day once a month. Now, I don't know how that compares with the pay you get as a representative, but I had to take quite a cut in pay, and probably you can relate to that in going from civilian life and working for Hershey Foods to my volunteering to get my obligation out of the way for the Army at that point.
Well, Dick, it's certainly, I made more than $21 a month, no doubt about that, but I too took the pay cut to do public service, and I think all of us that do public service do it because we want to do it, not for the pay.
That's correct.
And when I was in the service, I don't remember what the pay was, but I know it was only once a month, and I know it wasn't enough. I remember that much. I don't think the Army's kept up with the private sector very well, and that's a shame. We need to pay our troops well for what they do.
Did you know that the largest mural in the state capitol building in Harrisburg is housed in the chamber of the House of Representatives? In 1908, artist Edwin Austin Abbey painted the mural which stands over 30 feet high behind the Speaker's rostrum. Titled The Apotheosis of Pennsylvania, the mural depicts the great people who will forever have a place in the history of Pennsylvania. At the top of the mural sits the genius of state, which symbolizes the Commonwealth as a ruler on a throne. At her feet, standing on the first tier, are explorers and pioneers who played a key part in the early days of the Commonwealth. On the second tier stands colonial and revolutionary leaders who helped to form and create a democratic government. On the left of the mural are important military leaders, and on the right are leaders in science and industry. Some of those who grace the mural are William Penn, founder of Pennsylvania, who served as the first governor and Speaker of the House, Benjamin Franklin, who signed the Declaration of Independence and constitutions of both Pennsylvania and the United States. Now you know.
Let me ask you, since then you went from basic training, you volunteered for paratroopers.
That's correct.
You go to...
Well, first of all, in basic training, I was at the end of basic training. They kept me over on as an NCO for the next group, and that group that I was with was shipped off to Panama. And as a corporal at that point, I'm helping with the next group. But this gave me the opportunity once again to look at the officers that were assigned for this basic training for these troops, getting them ready to go to war. And as I looked at them, I thought, I'm a better man than these fellas. I know I could do better. And the opportunity to come along to volunteer for officers training school. So after a short course, I was shipped off to Fort Benning for officers training school. So 3 months later, I'm a 90-day wonder. I'm a second lieutenant. Then I volunteered for the parachute troops.
So there were several steps in
There were
between.
several steps.
Before the book starts out at Curry about all the training.
Correct.
But you actually had months of training prior to that.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, Curry, they talk about the training. Was it as mentally challenging physically, or was it more?
It's civilian life to life in the Army, and you have to make up your mind that you're going to be adjusted here once the war is Pearl Harbor. You make up your mind you're in now for the duration, baby. You're not just in for a year, for an obligation. So you're here to get a job done. And you have to adjust yourself mentally. And I like to stress that point, whether you're a paratroopers or what job you are. If you join the paratroopers, you have to adjust mentally to the fact that you're going to jump out of an airplane behind the enemy lines. And to do that, you must be in shape physically. Ambrose liked to put it in terms like this. He said, unless you're in good physical shape, forget being a leader. It's not going to work out. You have to be in good physical shape to be a leader. And that's so true. And that opinion was only after he had interviewed, I guess you could say, thousands of servicemen, because he had dedicated his life to interviewing and getting the memories of all the veterans.
There's a quote in the book from Private Kurt Gable about Jake, Joe, and I, and how we became a family and closeness. And I couldn't help but want to ask the question, that band of brothers, that bond, which you talked about not only in the book but on the house floor and here. I think some people who were never in the military can't appreciate that other family that you have and that closeness. And I saw that in some of the photos coming from Iraq, where guys would say
Correct.
to an embedded reporter, I don't want to call home. Let Jim call home because
Correct.
he was wounded or his mom's sick or something.
Correct.
Can you explain a little bit about that love, that bonding, that familyness?
Yes. You're working with these men in this unit, and you're sharing the hardships, and you're sharing the fact of a job that you have to do. This bond that grows with the people that you're working with is a closeness that somebody that isn't a part of it and that would be the folks back home, cannot understand or appreciate. So to share that with the folks back home, they don't understand it because they haven't been through it. To illustrate that point, I can pass along this thought. It was obvious as the war was over, and we had a lot of men marrying English girls, French girls, and so forth. And I can understand what was happening. The soldiers realized that when they came back home, that if the girls that they would meet back home would not appreciate, would not understand what he had been through. And there was a bond, just the fact that the girls were from England, and through the bombings and the hardships of rationing and so forth, the folks back home had never been subjected to rationing and the hardships, and that's why many married girls from countries that we had conquered.
Good point, Dick. Thanks. Another point on the Fort Benning, and I found this almost comical when I read the book, that when you guys went there after 2 days, the quote expert trainers, the instructors, said, "Hey, we can't keep up with you guys." How did that make you feel?
Well, on that point, I should point out, first of all, that Colonel Sink had some of the officers qualify as paratroopers at Toccoa. And to do that, he had this idea. He brought this plane in from Benning to pull this thing off, that we could make our 5 jumps at Toccoa. And he ran what we call the Junior Olympics, which was a test. All officers run up and down Currahee, how many push-ups you can do, chins, etc. And it so happened this week I came out first, so I had the honor of being the jump master of the first plane to qualify officers at Toccoa. And so my qualification was at Toccoa. By the time we had Benning for qualifying, the few officers that had qualified beforehand were sent to things such as demolition schools and infantry schools, advanced infantry schools, while the men were going through this qualification. And of course, as you point out here, after 2 days, the instructors realized these fellows are better shape than we are. You know, they're ready to jump. So they went immediately into packing the parachutes and getting ready to make the jump. Didn't waste a lot of time.